Well, I think in the first place, we need to reframe the entire debate because you have one side that's basically demonizing Syrians, and the other side that is saying we should have complete multiculturalism and no nation state. The left-wing protesters basically are saying that, and we have to actually take a step back and question how did we get here,
Yes.
and that is by the creation of these wars and the promotion of terrorism in the Middle East. And there is an objective through these wars to force multiculturalism, force people out of their homelands without their will, and put them somewhere else. And the reason for this is to annihilate the existence of nation states. And this is something that Zebig Brzezinski he's one of the main founders of the Trilateral Commission and Obama's advisor, has always promoted, that the nation state should no longer exist and should be destroyed. So before we, get into whether they should come or not, you have to first, ask how the Syrians themselves got to this situation. And they don't want to be refugees. Nobody wants to be refugees. And a lot of them are saying that they would love to be able to return home. If you heard them speak for themselves, ideally people should be able to stay in the land that they love with their own family members. And the thing is, the idea that these refugees are ISIS and hence dangerous forgets the fact that the majority of ISIS is not even Syrian. ISIS came in from around the world to Syria. So this started with ISIS sympathetic Europeans and Americans going into Syria. And, interestingly, ISIS has this multicultural, multinational, ideology to it, that they don't actually believe that the Syrian nation belongs to the Syrian people. So, it's like two birds with one stone. And with the Paris attacks, so part of this debate of demonizing Syrians and, it's actually on purpose because it is one of the means in which to convince people that bombing Syria is the right thing to do. In reality, the right thing to do would be to stop funding terrorism and to allow the Syrian country to rebuild and for the refugees to be able to return home. Because even if the U.S., accepts a few thousands of them, there is millions of refugees, and it's not going to solve any problem. It's just sort of like to alleviate the concerns of the left-wing do-gooders that now get to feel good about themselves because they got a few thousand Syrian refugees to the States, whereas they're actually
it's a half measure
without any prospects of a future. And some of these people have had their entire livelihoods destroyed, their homes, their businesses, and they have nothing. They're coming in with nothing, and it's not a situation that anybody actually wants to be in. So it's all being created by these wars. And one of the other thing I have to speak to is this idea that we should only. I've heard some U.S. politicians say that we should only bring in Christian refugees, or Christians should be prioritized. And again, that's part of an insidious plot to genocide Christians in the Middle East, which has been going on for years. We saw it. The population of Iraq Christians basically wiped out and continue to be wiped out even before ISIS came into the scene. So this is again, part of that plan to remove the history of the Middle East, which is the birthplace of Christianity from the Middle East, and also to brain drain the Middle East by pushing out all of these refugees. Some of them, there is a mixed bag of people. Some of them are poor, and some of them have come from educated backgrounds, and it's part of preventing Syria from being able to stand on its feet and rebuild by brain draining all these refugees, and not just Syria, all the Middle Eastern countries that have been suffering through war in the last few years.
And you make a very...
I'm not sure that he has a conscience, but I'm sure that there are people in the United States that do have a conscience, and they might actually feel that it's the right thing to do, to bring in these refugees, when really the right thing to do is to stop the wars. And the most ironic thing is some of the newspaper headlines coming from the UK and in Europe when one of these children, Syrian refugee children, drowned off the coast. The headlines were, bomb Syria for this child, which creates more refugees. So really, the solution isn't talked about, and that is because they don't want a solution. They want to take people away from their homelands and mix up all the nations so that they can have their one world order. And the other thing I wanted to speak to, part of it is the corporations as well. They get to bring in people from everywhere and drop down the wages. And Syrians, the passport, as we saw from the Paris attacks, the Syrian passport is now very easy to fake. And there's no way of telling who is really Syrian crossing the borders. The United States doesn't really have a good relations now with the Syrian government, which is the only country able to tell you if that passport is real or not. So, but the other thing that really frustrates me as a Syrian is now, as a Syrian, basically everybody thinks I'm ISIS because of the Syrian name. It's just an association that people are making now, even though ISIS is something that we have suffered from, not that we have caused.
Absolutely.
This so-called war on ISIS is really a war between the U.S. and Russia, and some of the people inside the U.S. State Department are so overzealous and basically insane that they are ready to start a world war and kill us all just so they can take over the entire Middle East and Eastern Europe as well. There's no balance of power anymore. We're really heading towards a dangerous situation.
Absolutely. Very interesting point, because I tried very exhaustively to explain this to people, what you just said. It's the policies of the United States, and it's not all our fault, but, a large part of it is, whether you talk about sending al-Qaeda into Syria, you talk about drone strikes in Yemen and Pakistan, going down to Mexico, sending guns down there, Operation Fast and Furious. And it's not all Obama. You have the Bush family with Iraq. You have Reagan with Iran-Contra. So it's been going on for a very long time in many different places. But as you say, Obama will go send a drone strike or send a jet to go blow up a hospital and say, oops. And then after he spends our tax dollars doing that, he wants to bring everybody here, like you said, to make himself feel better, to clear his own conscience. Meanwhile, he's double tapping the American people, saying, give me your money for these wars. And then after he tears up the country, use your tax dollars to fund the people or to house the people that I completely ruined their country.
Well, absolutely.
Now, Mimi, we have about a minute left. And I know another thing that's very important to you was the Russia situation. So what are your views on that?
I think,